How can schools create a welcoming culture and build trust with English language learners and their families? Please join me for Building Trust, Part 2 of the adlit.org webcast, English language learners. Hello, I'm Delia Pompa. Welcome to the adlit.org webcast, English language learners. In part 1, we discussed some demographic trends among English language learners, or ELLs. Now we'll talk about developing strong relationships between schools and the families of ELLs. Thank you, Kathleen, Deborah, and Susan for joining us. Kathleen, it's hard to get families of these kids sometimes involved in schools. Why is it so important to reach out to ELL families, to students and their families? And what are the challenges?
I think for me, in my experience, the importance is that families want to be involved. And there's real motivation on the part of the family of, I want to be part of my child's education, I want to be involved, I'm not quite sure how, and yet I want to show up and be there. And so, you know, what I think is important and incumbent on the rest of us in education is how we think about strategizing to open those doors for families who really want to participate.
Deborah, what are some of the ways we can build trust with the families of these ELL students and encourage their involvement in school?
I don't think it's necessarily rocket science what we need to do. I think it's relevant to lots of students and families as well. But it's basic. It's, you know, we have to engage them and trust and work with the assets students bring to the school and their families and build from that bridge. We need to make sure that we have services, support services and programs that are culturally relevant and appropriate, and reach out to the community. So it's not just seen as the student and the parent, but the engagement of the community more broadly. One example that I've seen used rather well is something called promotoras, which are promoters, which is schools engaging members of the community, often those who had kids who went through the school, and using them as parent liaisons, and they have a little bit more trust and faith with other members of the community, and having them help impart information, bring parents to the school as well to help bridge some of the cultural gaps, but also the trust and the awareness of what their role is in their child's education, because it could be different from their country of origin with the system we have here.
Give us an example of a promotora and what they could do in a school system with a parent.
Sure. There's an example it's happening all over the country, but in Los Angeles Unified School District, we know there are programs where there's a mother that they reached out to, and this is a community that had a combination of Latinos and Hmong parents, and they reached out to a handful, about 4 or 5 Latino parents and about 3 or 4 Hmong parents, and had them go out and do off-site, not on school, gatherings to talk about education, their rights and responsibilities. And once they felt a little more comfortable, they started talking to other people, doing house meetings. And then eventually they had tried to engage them in PTA sessions at the school to engage with teachers. So they started externally, but brought it back into this campus.
What about parents with no formal education themselves? What can schools do to support them?
I think that there's great opportunity to engage parents. I think parents want to be engaged, as Kathleen said, is finding how to do that. So some of the things we've seen work is offering parent support services at the school itself, having ESL courses online. There are parent classrooms, they call them, where parents can come in and be resources, bring parents in as TAs, teacher aides, or lunchroom monitors, and so they can see their child's educational environment, they can become familiar with the setting and the teachers in the classroom, and therefore feel more engaged, even if they don't have a formal education themselves.
You say get more comfortable with the school, and I'm going to turn this over to Kathleen. You know, sometimes parents without formal education may have some distrust of the school system. What can we do, what can the schools do about building their school culture so that parents feel comfortable in the school and they feel supported in the school?
I think that the home visit is really important, but where a school system can't support home visits for whatever reason, what's really important is when the parent and the family walks in that front door and they come into the school and they walk up to into the office, and it's their first introduction into a school. And the people that are there, that are often busy with 1,000 activities and taking care of students, just turn and acknowledge that the family's there. And to make sure that the family's, I'll be right with you, doesn't have to be in the language that the family understands, and can have materials set up, because part of what is a school responsibility now is to make sure that parents receive all the information that's necessary in the language that the parent understands the best. And so whether it's welcoming information, introductory, here's the first meeting, here's where we would like to see you, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that first introduction is probably one of the most important introductions.
We focus on the schools, and there are other institutions that help these families. Can you tell us a little bit, Susan, about libraries and how they can work with families of English language learners?
Absolutely. I know schools are always looking to reach out to families because they recognize that the partnership is so critical, and the language barrier is an issue, and that's where sending home all your communication in other languages is very helpful. And perhaps when families come in, having a welcoming environment, just bulletin boards and all, but going on to beyond the schools and going out to the community. In the area where I worked, we've worked very closely with the town library, and we had what we called a meet and greet, and we invited all the families to come in, and we brought in all the community groups, school groups of programs that are available for the families. The library had childcare for the younger children, and they had activities for the school-age children, and they had the gentleman who was in charge of the teen room come out and work with the teenagers as well. And it was a lot of information that was shared. The walls were coming down. It was helpful for our school, and I think all schools should do this, is to inform families what is it that they expect on the part of parents for participation. Parents who are born or raised in the U.S., who are familiar with U.S. culture, are going to understand what the expectation is for parent participation. But people who may not be familiar, we need to bridge that. And what's so helpful about working with our library is they realized we have a whole pocket of our population, the community, we are not working with, we are not meeting their needs. They went out, they acquired some grants, they ended up getting books and materials in their native languages. They also showed parents what resources they had available, as well as the technology, computer, internet access. And every parent before they left was given a library card. So it helped open those doors.
If I could, one of the things that I think is really important too is not only the welcoming environment, but there's actually federal funding that the schools receive in Title III, where it specifically says that the funds can be used to involve parents in the education of their child, whether that's a parent information center, or whether it's materials that are translated, or it could be even education classes. My experience working in the inner city in one of the major cities in the country with families was specifically where families said to me and to the group that I was with PTA, we really want classes in English, but it was to help their children with homework. And so it was, through massive, it's going on all over the country where families are saying, give us the tools that we need so that we can be involved, including whether it's language classes, or teach us how to help our students with homework, or teach us how to get online for, online information, et cetera, et cetera. But they're just clamoring for more information.
The federal law provides for parent information centers. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
I know that they're well funded, and that there's a process that the centers have to go through in order to draw down the funds, and it's usually a collaboration with parent advocacy groups and schools and teachers, so they collaborate to come together. It could be with the business community, and it can be with higher ed, but it's specifically to open a center that's geared to parents, for parents, and with parents that are in school clusters, so that the parents can be involved in that areas, in the school areas, education of the student.
Deborah, you work across the community. Are there other examples of ways, of institutions in the community that help parents and support parents of English language learners?
Yeah, I think there are numerous ones. Part of the challenge for schools is to link up to them in some ways. And I do think, as you shared earlier, the issue of clarity of expectations and understanding something that's culturally relevant is really important. And we see this, a lot of community-based organizations who are taking that extra effort and that extra step, which I think is important. We talk to parents who've said to us, in my country of origin, if my student isn't doing well, then it's the teacher's responsibility to assume she's not doing her job. But in this country, what I had to learn was that if my student isn't doing well and I don't bring in a tutor, then I'm not doing my job as a parent. So they're part of it is the cultural relevance and expectations that they come with, that we bring in, and community-based organizations that work with the specific communities tend to be the most nuanced in understanding what they bring to an educational context and how to help bridge the gap.
Susan, with all your years of experience, I keep focusing on your treasure trove of experience. Can you share with us a specific outreach effort that you used as an ESL teacher?
This one is a very exciting end of the year culminating activity. We called it the ESL Extravaganza. We invited all our families in for a potluck dinner at the end of the school year, and at this point we showcased the talents of our students as well as recognizing their achievement and their effort that they've put in through the school year. So all the families brought in a dish and we had events going on throughout. It was just such an entertaining event, but we realized that not all parents would be able to attend, so we had the site be a very easy one for all of them to get to, as well as providing transportation if they weren't able to. So that way we had more turnout.
Deborah, I have a double question for you. There are two groups that sometimes feel that they can't help families or can't work with ELL students. Those are teachers who don't speak the native language, and they're classmates of ELL students who aren't ELL themselves. Right. What are ways both of these groups can support both ELL students and their families?
That's a great question. I think, we found that sometimes the simplest things can make a substantive difference, and making students feel like they belong, that they're engaged and a part of it. For teachers, we found very simply doing professional development, could be an hour, 2 hours, where run them through pronunciation classes. So that you get students, if you have a large Hispanic or Hmong population, that you can say their name. For example, we had teachers who said to us, or students who would tell us that they couldn't say their name right. They would say Jesus Jimenez. And when you think about it, if you just knew a little bit more about the language, you know that it's Jesus Jimenez, and the student would feel so much more engaged in the classroom that you at least can say their name accurately and appropriately. I think for students who are involved, peer learning is so important. And some people might say it's mentoring others, but learning from each other and recognizing that students of different backgrounds can learn how to contextualize and talk about what they're learning in the classroom in other settings, whether it's the lunchroom or in the hallway, and getting to know them one-on-one can really help make a difference in their education.
Sometimes it's the little things, isn't it? Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Our discussion of English language learners does not end here. Please join us for part 3 of the English Language Learners webcast, Good Instruction for ELLs. You can learn more about adolescent literacy and watch the other segments of this webcast at www.adlit.org.
Funding for this adlit.org webcast was generously provided by Carnegie Corporation of New York. Additional funding for adlit.org was provided by the Ann B. and Thomas L. Friedman Family Foundation.